Meantime, Palantir reporting third quarter results above expectations in a big way. The company issued better than expected fourth quarter guidance. Shares down in the pre-market this morning. We'll talk about that as well. But joining us right now is somebody we've been talking about, frankly, all morning. Alex Karp is with us, Palantir's CEO. Alex, it is so good to see you this morning. We had your biographer on the broadcast before, and we're speaking about you now in third person, but now we're doing it in first person. The earnings were a blowout, I think, across the board. We can talk about maybe why the stock market reacting the way it is. But, you know, I was listening to the call yesterday, and I wanted to, just for those who didn't get an opportunity to hear it, I think you made some fascinating points about why you think this company and maybe even yourself are so misunderstood.
Well, there are lots of easy ways to misunderstand me. I misunderstand myself, and, you know, it's not like the super conventional playbook thing. Look, we're an anti-playbook company. If you want to do the personal version, I'm like this dyslexic, formerly and I believe currently still left of center, who actually sticks up for progressive values, which triggers, you know, TDS loving people, because I think the Democrats aren't no longer progressive. And then the company is built in a truly sui generis, unique way, which would only be possible in America, and actually explodes every assumption of how an expert would build a software business. The more you actually know about building software, the more odd, unique, and inexplicable our rise in success, and I would say domination on the enterprise software battlefield looks and is. And then I would say one of my main issues is Palantir, because we called a lot of things that are kind of establishment views that often are viewed as kind of being super woke into question in every single assumption of Palantir. The people who piled in to Palantir were people investing their own money, often people who are not in the investor class, non-experts. And even till today, the experts sit on the sideline and say, hey, this can't be true, while the average American who invested in Palantir, and for the first time, maybe arguably since World War II, average Americans got venture returns investing in Palantir. So you have this massive divide between the average person who evaluated it themselves and the expert class that still was working on assumptions that have historically not been true, that obviously, if you look at the earnings, if you actually look at, we grew the company, I mean, I'll go through if you want to go through the numbers, but extraordinary results, yep. And then the expert class is weak-kneed and the retail people are all in. So, but in fairness,
but that's what I wanted to ask you about. Yeah. In terms of because there is a misunderstanding. Clearly, you know, you look at the analysts. Most analysts, you know, think that this stock is overpriced. You have people like Michael Burry out there shorting it. Everybody who's shorted this stock thus far has been on the losing end of it. And I'm trying to understand, just from, if you look at sort of the growth trajectory, the sales, how much of the sales, frankly, I think actually are even coming, there was a huge part coming from even existing customers, and just what the scale of this thing ultimately looks like in your mind.
Okay, there are two parts. You know, of course, when I hear short sellers attacking what I believe is clearly the most important software company in America, and therefore in the world in terms of our impact, simply to make money, and trying to call the AI revolution into question, where we have this anomalous numbers, 114, rule of 40, et cetera. It just is super triggering, because these people, they could pick on any company in the world. They have to pick on the one that actually helps people, that actually has made money for the average person, that is actually supporting our warfighters. Why do they have to go after us? And I'll tell you what, it's crazy motivating, because I'll tell you why the short sellers are constantly getting screwed by Palantir. Because every time they short us, we just are like tripling down on getting the better numbers, and part, honestly, to make them poorer. But okay, so the question of like the actual power of the business and what is it worth. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the things that is actually in the book, the biography, and that I actually think that you always have to ask is the person persuasive or are they right? And across all sorts of movements, political, I mean, you see this on the regressive part of the Democratic Party. We're about to probably have a complete disaster. I was born in New York. But if you actually said, do these things actually work? Everyone's like, of course I'm not going to vote for that. But instead they ask, does it work in theory? The theoreticians, you have to ask, how often have you been right? And Palantir is about pragmatic decisions that create unfair advantages for America and its allies. And on that, we've been right for almost 20 years on all major decisions, and I believe we'll be right going forward. Now, you could argue, I don't know, like they're constantly like, but they thought Palantir was overvalued at 10. They thought it was overvalued at 20. I'm not even here saying what the valuation is. I'm just saying find a company in the world that has a rule of 114, that has U.S. commercial growing at 121%, that aggregate growth in the U.S. is 77%, that has throwing off free cash flow in a way that's anomalous, and that is fully aligned with our customers. And you figure out the value, but they're in the business of being skeptical and being wrong, and we're in the business of giving an unfair advantage to American workers, American warfighters, and our investors.
Being short is a very difficult place to be because you can lose everything, right? You can drive these people into the ground.
Thank God.
Like that. Michael Burry put a really big bet on it. It's almost $1 billion. It's $912 million. That's a big step for him to put into that. When you say you redouble your efforts, what do you do? What do you go back in?
Well, first of all, it's like he's actually putting a short on AI. So the way I read it, it was us and NVIDIA, and it's like he's
the biggest position is you, though.
Yeah.
I'm just through all the shorts.
Great. Okay. So, and then, by the way, with the shorts, it's very complex. It's not even clear that, honestly, I think what is going on here is market manipulation. We delivered the best results anyone's ever seen. It's not even clear he's not doing this to get out of his position. I mean, these people, they claim to be ethical, but, like, they're actually shorting one of the great businesses of the world. And I'm not against shorting as a matter of theory, but I'm just saying pick something that is not doing a noble task. And, it's us against them, and that's a good position for us. I mean, look. When you're printing a rule of 114, again, people who aren't technical, I think roughly an incredible score, like an Olympic grade score on rule of 14 is like 50. I mean, that's roughly like if you're between 50 and 7, you're an Olympic athlete, a unique implement athlete. This is like Michael Phelps like score, like Michael Jordan. Like there are no scores like this. And 121 growth off of almost a 1.5 run rate in U.S. commercial, and the 77% growth in the U.S., and an aggregate off of an aggregate base of $4.5 billion. By the way, I predicted we'd get here. So, it's like if you want to short that, be my guest. You go ahead. We're just going to go do our things. I mean, look, I'll tell you, there's a tale of two cities in our society. We need experts versus retail. And you see it like, I don't know why these newspapers are helping Mandani win. I don't know why we can't have honest discussions about our future. I don't know why we have to allow fentanyl attack. But it's almost always sympathy for the expert that doesn't need it, the short seller that has some ridiculous reason for doing something against. I mean, most of GDP growth in this country is because of AI. The real question is, how do we grow that and expose workers? What is the worker available GDP? That's the question for our society. Instead of aligning on that, we've got these completely. And again, if the numbers weren't there, great, be my guest. But then the numbers are there. So then you're not. It's not even clear he's actually shorting us. It's probably just how do I get my position out and not look like a fool? I don't know, but I do think this behavior is egregious, and I'm going to be dancing around when it's proven wrong.
Right. Alex, we've heard a lot of talk from the likes of a Michael Burry, but more broadly about whether we're in an AI bubble, whether the economics make sense. Clearly, in the context of Palantir, they do make sense insofar as you're printing money over there. Not everybody in the AI space is printing money in the same way, and they're spending an enormous amount on chips, data centers, and the like. How do you see the broader space right now in terms of just how things are developing?
There are two subtle issues in AI. What is the addressable market, and what is the addressable market for things that work? Meaning you make more money and the quality of the money is higher, so top line and bottom line grow. Palantir, we're in the business of a part of the addressable market where it works and it can be quantifiable, either commercially or on the battlefield. So clearly, and over time, you're going to have Pareto optimality, meaning that every part of the stack is going to have to create more value than they charge. That's just obvious. And if that doesn't happen, it will be a bubble. And, I'm sorry, short sellers can't tell the difference between products that work and products that don't, but these numbers should show you that there's a part of the market that, to quote you, is printing cash, and it looks like that part of the market is the part we own. There's a separate question, by the way, which I think is equally relevant. What part of the GDP growth is available for workers, what we call worker available GDP? And that's like one of the unique things about Palantir is whether it's on the battlefield, like the people writing the scripts for these very complicated operations, or building batteries or doing things on the factory floor are being enhanced by our product. And those two questions are going to define arguably the future of what happens in this country. Does GDP grow because of AI, which only can happen if there's Pareto optimality, or and what the way we see it, the customer pays less than the value they create, which is abnormal, not exactly equal Pareto optimality. And that, it's unknown, honestly. You have this massive growth, but currently, as far as I can tell, the two companies he's shorting are the ones making all the money, which is super weird. Like, the idea that chips and ontology is what you want to short is batshit crazy. But leaving that aside, there's a bigger question, which is the average American believes AI is happening. They're just not sure if it's going to happen for them or it's just me getting rich. And that's the battle we have to fight, because if you want a sane society, you can't just have GDP growth for us and no GDP growth for them. So, like, finding out what is available for the worker and proving it's available for the worker is going to be absolutely crucial. By the way, to be slightly political, you can't, if the AI revolution is real, it has downstream consequences. Like, how can you have an AI revolution and an open border?
Are we safer as a society or less safe than we were 5 years ago because of AI?
And I wanted to ask you, I've talked to Lonsdale about, unfortunately, packed stadiums and drone attacks and things like that. And he said that's something that we need to, at some point, face.
Well, there's a lot of complicated questions, because there's it's so funny because, in this book, which is, there's a lot of it's true, but then it's like the surveillance state. So, interestingly, I and Palantir have historically been on maximal safety and maximal data protection, and the product is actually built despite, if you're being told Palantir is easy, is the product you use to surveil you, you're the mark. We actually, so how do you have maximum safety where you can still have a personal life? And so, personal life may mean you're just flirting with the person next to you. It may mean you're at the stadium with someone you shouldn't be. It may mean you're just there alone when you should be at work. We all have things we need and want to do in our private lives, and part of democracy is we get to keep that. And Palantir's architecture makes it possible to have heightened safety and reduced surveillance. Now, you have this issue across are Americans safer? A lot of it comes down to, are we going to have a mandate that actually helps working women and men? Because the truth in our society is you're pretty safe if you have money. What happens to you if you're in an environment where you're poor or working class, black, white, Hispanic, anything, is you are then in an environment where people are espousing they believe in what they're saying, while in facto letting you live in a war zone. Whether it's the inner cities or the border, we essentially have a class divide in this society where underclass people, white, black, Hispanic, everyone, they absorb all the negative externalities of policies, and those of us who can afford to sit here have a great life. And the real question for our society, in my view, and for AI is, how can we make sure people participate in GDP, which also means they can go home safely, they can go to school, they can come back from school, they can go to the border and not get shot. We don't have fentanyl coming in our society. And, more people have died from fentanyl in the last year than all service members since World War II. And almost all those people are working class. And that's why no one cares. If they were Yale grads, you'd have a bomb being dropped on some South American country, it would stop. And so there's a huge societal thing. Then you get to mass events, and we've seen very destructive to our core assassinations of people who had heroic roles. We saw Abe in Japan, that was outside of America. We saw Charlie Kirk. We've seen the CEO of United. We saw people cheering these things. So in my view, there is the stadium issues, and these are very hard issues. How do you actually protect against drone? There are technologies which are not publicly available that need to be made available that can help. But there's always a risk of something happening, because the only way to take the risk to zero is to eviscerate all our civil liberties. So that's why I'd say, if you actually look at, it's like gun deaths. Guns are not a problem in the society. Guns in the inner city create most of the deaths. So how do you protect the Second Amendment and change gun deaths in this country? I mean, of course, there are other gun deaths that happen, but statistically, and these are what we should do with technology is make sure the people who are living the worst lives live lives closer to ours, and make sure our lives advance as well, but never with the idea that we're going to reduce crime to zero, because the only way to do that is to reduce deviant behavior to zero. And none of us want that, because I'm not the only one who's a freak show. I'm just more open about it. And every single person who's like, oh, and I'll tell you something else before I get to you. There's a big lesson in probably the Mandani disaster, the short seller, the fentanyl thing. if you think you can sit on the sidelines here, like in our generation, we thought we could outsource or like anti-Jewish bias. Like you cannot outsource it to the experts. If you think the experts are going to stop anti-Jewish bias or the fentanyl or whatever, no, they're not. They're lame. They're scared. They're gonna listen to the short seller instead of reading the numbers. Like this is a really big lesson. Listen to the short seller. Look at our numbers. In all these things, every single person that cares is going to have to stand up and say, you know what? I mean, it's crazy that we all have to be advocates for ourselves, but the experts are not showing up. They're scared.
You're
They're drinking.
mad.
Huh?
You're mad.
Well, you should be mad. Like, it's like, I mean, it's just like, and then, but of course, the positive side is we have these problems no other society has. Like, I spent half my life in Europe. Europe has no AI scene. The GDP growth that, is being besmirched by this wonderful, seemingly numerically illiterate short seller is a bounty of riches. Like, Germany would cut off its proverbial beer garden to get this problem. And so, but we should not screw it up. And the way we screw it up is we are all on the sidelines. We let experts tell us what we should think, and we get screwed.
Alex, it's a longer conversation. I know we're going to have another one, I'm sure, very soon. I want to thank you so very much for jumping in impromptu this morning after it was a great earnings report. So congratulations on that.
And congratulations on your book. Everywhere I go, there's somebody, it's like behind them. I mean, everyone has it in their hand. Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much, Alex. We appreciate it. Let's take a quick final look at the markets just for one moment here. We do have some red arrows across the board here. Dow off about 253 points, NASDAQ down about 380 points, S&P 500 off about 70 points. That does it for us. We will see you tomorrow. Squawk on the Street is up next.